So here's a good way to understand the housing market and why it's such an inflating price level industry. Whether it's purchasing a home, renting a home, short-term rental and leasing, every single category of real estate has increased dramatically in the last year or two. And by dramatically, more so than any other time in U.S. history that's been recorded. Even more than the housing bubble of 2008. What gives? What's behind it? And what can fix it? A lot of people want to predict, is the housing market going to crash? Is there going to be a decline in value? Is there going to be a reduction in prices? Is it going to continue to climb? People are making important financial decisions about buying a house, selling a house, moving based on a prediction of the market. Having a crystal ball of how and why the market's going to change will help you make that decision. So let's look at it this way. Let's give a really good analogy. Think about the housing market as a big game of musical chairs. Everybody knows musical chairs. There's a bunch of chairs, people are sitting in it, the music starts playing, they're moving around, and then it stops, and everybody sits down, and there's not enough chairs for everybody, and some people get kicked out. Well, the housing market right now doesn't have enough chairs. How many? Well, here's an article from the Wall Street Journal that says the housing market is short more than 5 million houses for people to live in. And that is rental and ownership and all kinds of residential units. It's because construction lagged for 2 decades, and that's what the problem is. So, how does that relate to musical chairs? Well, just think. There are 5 million people standing up that want to sit in a chair. That there's no chair for them to sit in. There's no house for them to move into. So, even if somebody is sitting in a chair, wants to sell their house, they're a homeowner. If they stand up by selling their house, where are they going to sit down? Where are they going to go to? When that music stops, there's not enough chairs. They don't want to be one of the 5 million people now outside of home ownership looking in, because they were already in a home. They were already a homeowner. That's how you have to look at it. There are 5 million households, 5 million housing groups, family units that want to buy a house that can't, because there's not enough houses. How did that happen? Well, 2 decades of lagging building. How do you fix it? Well, using the same analogy, you might think, we'll just build some more chairs. No problem. Well, there's a couple reasons why that isn't an instant fix. Obviously, building a house is different than building a chair. You can build a chair in an afternoon in your workshop. A house is a little more complicated of a project. But you would think that you could build houses if it was needed. And you can. General contractors and builders can build houses. That's what they do for a living. But in order to build a house, first you have to have land, and there's some land available. Then you have to subdivide the land into housing blocks, into legal parcels where you can put a separate single-family home on that parcel. Then you have to get permits. Once you get the permits, you have to install utilities, electrical, plumbing, sewer, water, communications, and that takes some time. Some areas of the country, there's a lot of regulatory requirements for making a piece of land into a buildable lot. You might just think, well, it's a lot. It's got grass and dirt, and you can just build on it. Well, you can, but converting an empty land to a buildable legal parcel is actually more complicated than it looks. You can't see it happening by looking at it. The same empty lot is going to look exactly the same once it's done being converted, but it will have legal process changes behind it. Permits, approvals, regulatory compliance, all that needs to be done before you can even start scratching the dirt. That has to happen 5 million times just to catch up with the current need. How fast can the building industry, construction industry, build an extra 5 million houses? Well, the building industry constructs about 2 million houses a year on average, but not all of those are going to cover the backlog. Many of those cover the new demand that comes out each month, quarter, and year. There's only a certain number of that 2 million houses that goes to catch up on the backlog. If it took 2 decades to get behind 5 million, how long is it going to take to catch up? Well, if you speed up the process, you might be able to catch up in half that time. Maybe catch up in a decade. Let's cut that in half again. Let's say you can get caught up in 5 years. What that means is for the next 5 years, there's still going to be a backlog, which means the prices will at least stay the same. The increase in price of house appreciation will probably stay the same. May not go up 20% a year, but it'll go up 5% a year, 6% a year. It's going to go up at least as much as inflation, if not more. Inflation is at 5 or 6%, maybe 7%, depending on how you measure it. Real estate values will probably go up higher than inflation because it's a leveraged product, meaning that for every dollar it goes up, it doesn't necessarily reflect a dollar more in mortgage payment because it's leveraged. It's a financed product. So inflation can go up even more on housing value before it starts to put pressure in a negative way on home buyers. It's not to say that higher prices don't make it difficult for people to buy houses, but there's a difference between a complaint and an objection. If you're a home buyer and the price is high and your mortgage payment is $400 more than really what you wanted to pay, that's a complaint. You're still going to buy the house, but you're going to complain about it. An objection is when the price is so high that you're just not going to do it, or you can't do it. You physically can't afford it. It's not that it's inconvenient or it's annoying or you hate it or it's a stretch or it's something you complain about. It's literally, I just can't do this. I can't afford this payment. I won't do it. We are now at a complaint level with home buying. We're not at a level of objection because people are still buying homes. Even though that the prices have gone up 20 or 30% since this whole thing started, rates have gone up 1 or 2%. That has resulted in a net monthly payment increase of $400, $500, $600, depending upon what price point you're in. If you're in the $300 to $400 price point, an increase in, even if the price of a house goes up $100,000 and the rate goes up 1%, that might result in a $500 a month increase in your mortgage payment. $500 a month increase in your mortgage payment. 500 more has not stopped the market at all. The prices have still gone up. There's still a demand. There's still a backlog of homes. There's still more people who want to buy houses than there are houses available. So that $500 or $600 a month increase in payment for home buyers hasn't put a dent in the marketplace. And it's because of musical chairs. There's 5 million more people that need houses than there are houses. See, this is different than the housing crash or bubble in 2008. In 2008, there were plenty of houses to go around. People weren't buying houses because there was a house shortage. They were buying houses because they're giving them away. The mortgage rates were next to nothing. You didn't have to get approved. You didn't have to have income. You had to have no assets, no down payment. And they were just giving houses away. There was actually too many houses back then. It was a supply-driven bubble. Too many houses. This is a demand-driven bubble. There's a shortage of houses. A demand-driven bubble doesn't pop. It can't pop because it's driven from underneath. It's got support level underneath. A supply-driven bubble is pulled from above. It's people pulling it up. And if you don't have that lever lifting up the market, it collapses. A demand bubble from underneath, it can't collapse because it's solid underneath. It's got buyers. There's still 5 million more buyers that want to buy houses that can't. They're not going away. 5 million people are not going to leave the country and reduce the house market. So even if prices go up another, let's say 20%, average house is 400,000, 20% is 80,000 more, interest rates go up a point, that'll add another $500 to monthly payments. But in this day and age, look, people already have an extra $300 or $400 on their budget from inflation of gas and groceries. So there is a capacity in the system for additional expense. It's not going to be easy. No one's going to like it. I'm not saying that this is a comfortable thing, but people can afford it. And there's still a lot of people buying houses with cash. So sometimes they're not even affected by the mortgage interest rate increase. Or they're putting 50% down. The price is going to have an effect. But look, if you look at a piece of real estate that you're going to pay 100,000 more than it was last year, but you know next year it'll be 50,000 more, it's really a no-brainer. It's not like you're spending 100, you're just temporarily taking 100,000 from your bank account and putting it in your house account. This is not going away. You're going to see articles on both sides of the equation. Now the housing bubble is going to crash, it's going to keep going up. Everybody's got an opinion, but look behind the opinion at what the facts are, what the data is that's supporting a person's opinion. Our opinion, officially, is that it's going to keep going up. Maybe not 20% in 2022. It might be 15%, 14%. That's a probably good estimated intelligent guess. 2023, maybe 6 or 7%. After that, it's a little more vague because it's farther out. It's really going to depend upon how many new homes are built in the next year or two, what happens with the economy, and what happens with inflation. Because even if the economy, meaning jobs, revenue, business income, goes down, there's a recession. Even if that happens, if there's inflation, house prices are still going to go up on new purchases. You can have both. You can have a recession and house price increase. It's called stagflation, where the economy stagnates, but inflation still goes up. That can happen. Probably will happen in 2023 and 24. After that, there's a lot of variables that are unknown. World economy, world politics, wars, pandemics, all that kind of stuff. But in reality, the fundamentals of the real estate industry, the one number to keep in mind is 5 million. There's 5 million less houses than are needed, and there's no quick fix for that. It's not like a musical chair factory where you can just build more chairs. You can call up the chair company and say, build me 5 million chairs. Okay, it'll be done in a month. You can't do that with houses. It's a longer building cycle. And there's a lot of obstacles in it. In addition to that, there's a few other factors. People talk about lumber prices, and they talk about labor availability, people willing to work for contractors. That's part of it, but that's not the big thing. That's just slowing down the fix. The fix, even in the best of times, would take a while to cover that gap of 5 million houses. It would take a while regardless. The only thing that lumber prices and labor and other things are doing is maybe making that fix take a little longer. So instead of taking 6 years, it might take 10 years, right? Or 5 years, it might take 7. Or 3 years, it might take 6, whatever. It's just going to take longer. But it's still a problem of fundamental math, supply and demand. And supply and demand is even overcomplicating it. The simple matter is more buyers than available product. Same thing is happening in the car business, but cars can adjust faster. And in reality, the manufacturers of motor vehicles are intentionally not building cars because it's better for them. We'll look at our next video, talk about how car dealers and manufacturers are still making money selling 1/5 of the cars they did 3 years ago. If you're a dealership selling 400 cars a month and now you sell 80 cars a month, how do you still make money with that drop in sales? You can actually make more money with less sales in the car business. Real estate's a different story, and we'll talk about that in the next video. So subscribe to get that notice when that comes out. Real estate is different. Real estate has a longer cycle. It's a more fragmented industry. There's not 5 or 6 manufacturers of cars nationwide. There's hundreds of home builders, thousands of home builders if you include small general contractors. And each one of them has their own procedure, their own strategy, their own business model. There's some big ones. Lennar, Pulte, KB Homes, all big builders. And they have land inventory, but they still have to face some of the same obstacles. In fact, for the big builders, sometimes the obstacles are worse. Getting appliances, getting paint, getting materials, because it's a larger volume. A small builder can kind of scramble around and maybe find something somewhere to build 1 or 2 homes. Building 1,000 homes, if you're short on dishwashers, that's going to be a bigger problem. So the takeaway is, picture a big game of musical chairs with 5 million people standing up waiting for a chair. As soon as somebody stands up, 5 million people are running after that chair. And the person who has the chair is hesitating on standing up because they have to find a chair too. They are now equal to those people outside of the market. Some of the buyers are actually buying a new house before they sell their old house. But since the inventory is so limited, if you already have a house, why would you move? Unless you hate your house, unless you have to move to another place. It used to be people were always looking for an upgrade. Better house, bigger, better lot, dream house, because you had a huge selection. If you had 100 houses to look at, you could find one that was way better than what you have. Nowadays, what are your chances of finding something better than what you already live in? You've been there for 3 years, 5 years, 6 years. Why bother selling? You already know what it's like. You've already fixed it up. You've done some improvements, remodel. Maybe if the reason you don't like your house is because it doesn't have granite countertops or an extra bedroom, it's easier for you to get a contractor to change those than it is to find a new house. So that's what a lot of people are doing. So unless somebody has to move because they have to live in a different place or they have to get a bigger house or a smaller house, there's no reason to move, because not only are there very few chairs from that musical chair to sit in, even if you find one, what are the chances it's going to be better than what you already have? You might even be going backwards in desirability. Unless you're somebody who has a big windfall and are going way up in market, from a $400,000 house to a $2 million house. And that happens, but that's not a huge volume of people. Some of the houses coming on the market were second homes that were Airbnbs, rental homes. The people are getting rid of those because the market has gone up and they want to cash out and get the windfall. That's most of the new inventory coming on the market are people who had a second home that was an Airbnb or monthly rental or long-term rental, and now they're seeing the price of it and saying, hey, I'm just going to take this cash and run. It's better than keep renting it all the time. Especially since during the pandemic, maybe you couldn't collect rent, or maybe your community is cracking down on Airbnbs. That's where most of the inventory is coming from. But at the same time, there's people who are buying a second home for the purpose of renting it out as a second home. In reality, it's almost a good investment to buy a second home, even if you don't rent it out for income. Just let it sit empty for a year. Had you done that a year ago, you would still be ahead of the game, even with no rental income. Most houses appreciated more than the income that the person lived in made that year from their job. So a second home doesn't seem like a bad idea. just to let it sit and accumulate for 6 months, 8 months, and resell it, even with sales commission. The number to remember is 5 million. If you're in a house that you own, thinking about selling it, think that there's 5 million piranhas out there want your house, but they also want the house that you would buy. So you're not really gaining anything. If you're a buyer, think that there's 5 million people out there, piranhas, looking at the house you want to buy. They want it just as bad as you do. That's your competition. That's what you're dealing with. Look at other options. Look at our other videos about building a house, maybe buying a house that's not in the traditional mainstream market. Those are available. There's thousands of houses around the country available that are not in the mainstream market that you could make mainstream, make usable for you a lot easier than finding a house that's already up to snuff for what you want to do.